The Young Ones, a show so absurd, so loud, and so utterly anarchic that it changed the face of British comedy forever. But how well do you really know this cult classic? From screaming punks to talking televisions, here are 15 weird and fascinating facts about the Young Ones that you probably never knew. So dust off your Doc Martens, grab your lentils, and let's get into the chaos. Before it became a cultural touchstone, The Young Ones was a bizarre underground stage show. It was born in the sweaty backrooms of the Comedy Store in London, where Rick Mayall, Nigel Planer, and Adrian Edmondson were tearing up the live comedy scene with experimental characters, sharp social critique, and utter absurdity. These early personas, particularly Rick and Neil, were tested on live audiences before becoming TV legends. The show's transition to television wasn't easy, but the creators refused to sanitize it. What worked on stage, shouting, chaos, and political jabs, worked even better when amplified for the screen. The BBC had no idea what it had signed up for. Forget traditional story arcs. Forget realism. This was a show where rats gave monologues, inanimate objects plotted revenge, and the laws of physics were more like loose suggestions. Every episode felt like a dream written during a fever. The show fused slapstick, satire, animation, and even existential philosophy into its jokes. You'd go from a gag about mouldy socks to a critique of capitalism in 30 seconds flat. It did not attempt to explain its weirdness because life, like The Young Ones, doesn't always make sense. Ever notice that The Young Ones often randomly featured bands playing live? That wasn't just for fun. It was actually a clever budget loophole. Music shows were funded differently from sitcoms by the BBC, so producers labelled the show as a variety programme. That allowed for guest spots by bands like Motorhead, Madness, and The Damned. It brought authenticity, grunge, and a dose of real counterculture to the show. Not only did it stretch the budget, it connected the programme with the youth movement it was reflecting. While most of the chaos was filmed on a set, the exterior of the house is very real and very ordinary. Located at 115 Codrington Road in Bristol, the brick facade became iconic thanks to those opening scenes of mayhem. Today, it's just a regular home on a quiet street. But for fans, it's sacred ground. A place where 4 of the most dysfunctional characters in TV history lived and often destroyed each other. It's almost disappointing how normal it looks in real life. Each of the housemates represents a different stereotype of the time. Rick, the obnoxious pseudo-intellectual; Neil, the depressed pacifist; Mike, the slick con artist; and Vivian, the destructive punk. But those names weren't random. They were callbacks to early character sketches from Mayall and Planer's stand-up routines. Even Mike's name was designed to sound aggressively normal, because in a house full of lunatics, being normal is the weirdest thing of all. These names carried layers of satire and made sure every viewer could recognise someone they knew or were. The Young Ones didn't just break the fourth wall, they absolutely obliterated it. Characters frequently turned to the audience, commented on the script, or even addressed the BBC directly. One iconic moment shows Neil literally walking off set to complain to the camera. Another has Rick complaining that no one understands his poetry before storming off to write more. This kind of meta-comedy was groundbreaking and inspired a generation of shows that followed, from Spaced to Fleabag. This wasn't just a show about students, it was a political statement. Every joke, every fight, every destroyed wall was infused with commentary on Thatcher's Britain, rising unemployment, student debt, and generational frustration. Rick's fake activism parodied real-life armchair revolutionaries. Neil's over-the-top pacifism mocked the hippie generation's fading relevance. Mike represented capitalist opportunism. And Vivian? Vivian was the angry scream of every youth who wanted to burn it all down. Vivian Bastard was more than just a lunatic. He was a fashion icon. His fluorescent mohawk, denim vest studded with spikes, and brutal boots became one of the most iconic looks on British TV. Adrian Edmondson spent hours preparing the mohawk before each shoot, and it became an instant punk symbol. Even outside the show, fans started copying the look. Today, Vivian's style lives on in cosplay, tribute art, and punk fashion references worldwide. One of the most legendary and bizarre moments in the show is a scene where all 4 characters begin screaming. That's it, just screaming. Loudly. For a long time. What's fascinating is that it wasn't even in the script. It was improvised during rehearsals and kept because it captured the energy of the show so perfectly. It was absurd, uncomfortable, and hilarious all at once. It's since been referenced in sketch comedy and memes as the pinnacle of the young ones' chaos. Rick wasn't just annoying, he was a deliberate send-up of the self-absorbed student revolutionary. Obsessed with his poetry, his fake activism, and his own supposed genius, Rick embodied a generation of wannabe radicals. Rick Mayall's performance was so layered that you almost felt bad for Rick, almost. His monologues like, "The people's poet is dead," are both painfully bad and strangely brilliant. Mayall turned pretentiousness into art, making Rick one of the most hated and hilarious TV characters of the 80s. Unlike anything else on TV, the young ones incorporated live action, animation, puppetry, and even claymation. One second, you were watching a real scene, and the next, a demonic sock puppet would appear or a talking toaster would deliver a political rant. These segments weren't just visual gags. They were symbolic of the show's refusal to play by any rules. Artists like the Cartoon Workshop contributed animated cutaways that added an extra dimension of weirdness, turning the show into a true multimedia experiment. It's no surprise that the BBC had problems with the young ones. Between the anarchist politics, frequent violence, sexual innuendo, and general chaos, censors were regularly on high alert. Some episodes had lines cut, others were delayed. And yet, the creators rarely backed down. In fact, the pushback became part of the show's rebellious identity. It wasn't just about making people laugh, it was about shaking things up, offending sensibilities, and challenging what television could be. Have you ever noticed how many episodes end with total disaster? Explosions, meteors, train crashes. It's like the end of the world was always just around the corner. This wasn't random. It reflected the nuclear paranoia and societal collapse anxieties of 1980s Britain. The world felt unstable, and the young ones turned that fear into slapstick. If the world's going to end, why not go out screaming while holding a flaming sandwich? After the young ones ended, Rick Mayall and Adrian Edmondson weren't done causing chaos. They went on to create Bottom, a series that took the dark humour, violent slapstick, and tragicomic characters to even greater extremes. Though different in structure, Bottom was a spiritual successor. 2 angry men in a grimy flat, causing havoc and refusing to grow up. It confirmed Mayall and Edmondson as masters of alternative comedy and cemented their legacy. The young ones ran for just 12 episodes between 1982 and 1984. That's it. But in that short time, it changed everything. It opened doors for alternative comedy, launched the careers of its cast and creators, and inspired a generation of comedians from the Mighty Boosh to the In-Betweeners. The show is still taught in media courses, referenced in pop culture, and quoted by fans across the globe. Not bad for a show that featured exploding microwaves and talking toilets. In the end, The Young Ones was never about making sense. It was about making noise. It was about rebelling against the dullness of grown-up life, against the cold rules of television, and against the idea that comedy had to be tidy, polite, or safe. So whether you're a Mike trying to keep it cool, a Neil just trying to survive, a Rick shouting into the void, or a Vivian with a crowbar, The Young Ones is your show. Thanks for watching. If you like this video, please leave a like, subscribe to our channel, and hit the bell icon for more. See you in the next one.